to all of you for coming out tonight. What a beautiful, wonderful, historic monument here in Palatka that we have. It's just one of the many things in Palatka and Putnam County that we can be proud of. It showcases nature, which is very important. And I can't thank Shan and Dick and Platt enough for the work that they do here every day. Truly, Vernon is correct when he talks about volunteers and what they mean to our community. And we do have a special and loving community. We're very fortunate. And it's given me an opportunity to work with Shan and to bring our Interlochen High School Jazz Band here this evening, along with the Culinary Arts Department and Chef Tyson, and also Chef Christopher Bjorn from Palatka High School, and they do a great job. Some of you may not realize that we have culinary arts at our high schools, and the students have done a tremendous job tonight. And everything they made themselves. It's homemade, and even the containers that they're in are compostable. So we're trying to really be green with our theme, and the forks are too. That's right, made out of sugar cane, absolutely. So we're very fortunate to have the opportunity to be here tonight to promote what we feel is a very important piece of Palatka history. And I just thank all of you for being here. I want you to enjoy our band, and mostly I want you to go back to all your friends and relatives and neighbors and tell them that not only did you see a piece of Palatka history, but you heard the best jazz band you've ever heard, and we have it right here in Putnam County at Interlochen High, and had the best treats you've ever had provided by Culinary Arts. We do need to continue to talk about the positive things in Palatka and Putnam County. If it starts with us and we promote what we have, it will carry out to the entire state and all across the nation, and we do need to capitalize on that. We have so much here in Putnam County to be proud of, and we do need to be promoting that. And so go forth and say nice things, and thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Shan Purinton. I'm standing in front of our Puck Puggy Bartram Trail sign, and this is the entrance to Waterworks. Our hope is to redo this entrance. The city and our volunteers have been talking about some ideas, but we are part of the Bartram Trail system. So Puck Puggy is one of the sites. I think there are over 30 sites on the Bartram Trail system. And as some of you know, we are open here at Waterworks every Wednesday morning from 8 until noon, and the first Sunday afternoon of every month. Standing in front of the Old Palatka Waterworks. Today we call it Waterworks Environmental Education Center, and we have lots of wonderful things going on here. Waterworks was constructed in 1886. It was built in response to the big fire that destroyed big parts of Palatka in 1884. At its peak, Waterworks could pump up to 1 million gallons of water a day for the city's use. So it was state-of-the-art back then. It operated until 1986, which is 100 years, and at that time it was phased out and sat in pretty much disrepair for quite a few years until interested citizens put together enough information, etc., to get a $250,000 grant, which refurbished the outside. The roof was repaired, or actually replaced, and the outside brickwork was repointed. Today, what we have here, well, there are 10 acres. The property belongs to the city of Palatka. And on the 10 acres, we have certainly the building, which houses a museum with artifacts and habitat information. We have information about water and its uses. and the St. Johns River. We also serve as a trail hub for not only the Greenways Trail System, but we have on site our own Puck Puggy Trail, which is, that's a fun name. It is the nickname for William Bartram. So we're now part of the Bartram Trail System. On the site as well, we have a gopher tortoise habitat, and we have just introduced 2 of our new residents. They are Sandy and Shelley, gopher tortoises that are now housed up in the habitat. We have an organic garden, which has about 18 to 20 organic gardeners operating in there, and we have wonderful produce. Down below the building, there are ponds and some tanks, as most people have seen when you walk the ravines. And we're looking at some uses we're going to make of those which have educational purposes. As far as education, we are delighted to host a lot of student groups. We can do things for kindergartners all through college-age students, and even some of our elder people have come to enjoy the scenery and the information that we have here. I'm thinking about other things that we have. In fact, the Wildflower Walkway, which is in front of the building, is one that is beautiful, especially this time of year with the Coreopsis in bloom. That's our state wildflower. The walkway itself is built of the brick from the city streets of Palatka. We have fantastic volunteers who come here, and we're open to the public every Wednesday morning from 8 until noon, and the first Sunday afternoon of every month. So we welcome people to come and visit us. We would be delighted to have student groups contact me or one of our volunteers, and we will certainly arrange something that will be valuable and very educational. Thank you. I'm standing on what we call the observation deck, and it allows us to view a lot of our Waterworks Environmental Education Center's grounds. If you can see over to my right, the old brick channel that brought the water initially from the ravines back in 1886. The springs and the streams in the ravines provided the water that was pumped up into the city, up to 1 million gallons a day. The water was pumped using steam engines, and they were driven by burning wood, probably cypress from the local cypress mill, the Wilson Cypress Mill, which was between our building and the river. In the 1930s, the settling ponds were constructed, and they allowed then gravity to pull the particulates down and settle to the bottom, which helped to purify the water in that way. In the 50s and 60s, these large tanks were built, and that allowed for sand filtration and also introduction of chemicals such as chlorine and fluoride. And that's pretty much what is done today at the water plant that is located over on Moody Road, which is next to the airport. And we also can see from here not only the ravines, which is behind me, but the golf course in number 4T. All of these properties back in the 1900s were owned by the city of Palatka, and today the Waterworks Environmental Education Center is currently owned by the city, as well as the golf course. The state park system, of course, owns the ravines. I'm standing in the building, which we called it the old pump house, because this is where the pumps were actually housed. Today, it is the center for many of our educational endeavors. In fact, I'm holding in my hands a keystone shape, and it represents the work that we do with the gopher tortoises, because gopher tortoises are a keystone species, which means they're very important to lots and lots of other animals and critters. In fact, they've calculated and counted over 350 other animals depend on the gopher tortoise, and especially the burrows, to survive. And we have over here some examples, some artifacts that we've collected. These are actually water turtles, but over here you can see some of the gopher tortoise skeletons or shells. You have to have permits to have gopher tortoises because they are protected. And the reason they're protected is because they're a keystone species. In addition to the things that we have in this room, as you can see, there are a lot of artifacts. In fact, there are skulls, there are different butterflies, the dragonfly. The dragonfly is our logo. It's our mascot for Waterworks. Dragonflies depend on water in order to not only survive, as we all do, but they lay their eggs in the water. And when you find dragonfly larvae, you will know that the water is of very good quality. We've done some micro-invertebrate work over in the ravines, and we found dragonfly, maidenfly, damselfly larvae. That's just one of the many things that we can do with our educational groups. I'm standing in what we call the water room in our Waterworks building. And behind me is our water wall. It provides a lot of information that we use with students and other groups who come to visit. We're particularly proud of it because it's part of a grant that was funded by our local Rotary, District Rotary, and the City of Palatka. As you can see, when I push certain buttons, the fiber optics operate. Students love this. And you can see in this particular arrangement of lights how the water from the Floridan aquifer goes up through our current system of water tanks, etc., and then eventually goes into homes in the city. We can talk about how we use our water, how we can be better stewards of our water. And then over here, we can even talk about what happens to water when we flush our toilets, when it goes down the drain, and how in our city the water is reclaimed and we use it for watering golf courses, local ball fields, etc. Also information about the recharge area. I'm holding in my hand a piece of limestone, which is a very important part of our Floridan aquifer. I'm standing by our Puck Puggy Nature Trail sign. This is the beginning of a trail that goes around the northern perimeter of the Waterworks Environmental Education Center. The Puck Puggy Trail is named after William Bartram. Puck Puggy is the nickname that the Indians gave to William Bartram back in the late 1700s when he was in this area and he was drawing pictures of all the flora and the fauna. In fact, he's the first person to draw a picture that we know of the gopher tortoise. The Indians thought a lot of William Bartram, and the name Puck Puggy means flower hunter or flower gatherer. I'm walking along Puck Puggy Trail, our nature trail that goes along the northern perimeter of the Waterworks Center, and I'm standing in front of one of the wells that was dug in the 50s and 60s. After water was used from the ravines to supply to the city of Palatka, they found as the need grew that they had to dig wells on the property. So there were 8 wells dug total. This is well number 7. It goes down approximately 300 feet. You can see also over there's a little spigot. They use that to test the water for E. coli and other bacteria.
My name is Dick Franz. I'm a volunteer here at Waterworks Environmental Education Center. And we are on a bridge that crosses a small ravine. We're not sure what the origin of this little ravine. It may be an old road that led up into here back in the 1800s. We're not sure of its history. But it adds a little interest to the trail itself. This is the Puck Puggy Trail. And Puck Puggy is a name that was applied to William Bartram when he came through in 1774-75 during the British period in Florida. The trail wanders through a hardwood forest. In Florida we call these forests hammocks. They are full of full-size trees, many different species. We are standing in amongst laurel oaks right here, but there's a lot of other things that not only were here when we first started working on this project, but we have since been adding a bunch of native shrubs and trees to this trail, members of this community that weren't here when we first started. And the idea is to put structure back into this forest. And in a hammock environment, we have plants that live close to the ground. the herbaceous layer, we have shrubs, and then we have trees that only grow up about 2/3 of the way to the rest of the trees, called subcanopy, and then finally the trees that grow really tall, which are the canopy species. And these plants are modified depending on what their light needs are. Remember, green plants through a process called photosynthesis creates its own food through a very complex chemical process. So this is one of the things that we talk to the kids about the structure of the forest, their need for light, and also need for water. And again, we're back to the water story. Let me show you some of the plants that occur here that we have put here that are sort of special kinds of creatures, and they help us tell this larger story. Some of the plants that I find intriguing that we've added to this site to make the story much more special for the students is, for example, the palm trees. They're one of the features of this kind of forest is that they have sabal palm in here. These are the palms that grow up into tree size, and we have a bunch of them surrounding us here. But we've also added a special little palm which occurs in this habitat but is disappearing. It's a fairly rare palm in North Florida these days, and that is called the dwarf palmetto. This is about as tall as it gets. This is one of the shrub layer that I had mentioned. This is an important component of that. It flowers, it's a flowering plant just like the other palms, and it produces fruits, and those fruits are edible for wildlife. Now we're further along on the Puck Puggy Trail, and again, if you look around you, everything is very green, and this is typical of a North Florida hammock. We have the plants that we have been planting here. While we're standing right here, I showed you the small palms that we planted. Well, this is the other plant. This is the other palm that gets to be a tree-sized palm. This is not, of course, tree-sized yet, but give it 30, 40 years and it'll be up in the canopy with the laurel oaks. So the Puck Puggy Trail is a source of information about how plant communities are structured, photosynthesis, and an idea of how diverse they really are and how neat they are. And it's an opportunity here at Waterworks to not only preserve the Puck Puggy Trail, but also to provide an experience for the kids to wander this forest. We have a lot of volunteers that work out here every Wednesday, trying to do clearing of weed species, also cutting back some of the natives that grow wild and over everything. And one of the things that is really, I think, intriguing is something called catbrier or smilax. It's a vine that grows in the hammocks, but it puts down a very serious tuber. This is what you usually see in the way of a tuber. The vine has thorns on it, which makes it a little tough to control. But one of the volunteers dug up this baby. This is a tuber that's responsible for a lot of the vines in this particular section of the property. Now, the curious story about this is that the Indians used this tuber as a source of starch. They apparently had to leach out chemicals out of it, but they were able to use it as a starch. And beyond that, I really don't have a lot of information. We have other folks that volunteer here as part of the education program and know a lot more about this kind of stuff. I know what it is, but how people used it in the past is beyond me. But this is neat. This is huge. I'd like to talk a little bit about this structure I'm standing in the doorway of. One of the things that we would like to do is to, again, tell this water story and we're going to tell the water story using the wetlands that you'll see in a moment, and use this facility. We're in the process of putting windows and doors in now and renovating it, and we'd like to set it up as a student research laboratory for high school and students, and also for interested students at St. John's State College. This room, when we have it set up and secured, we'll have tables and aquaria and students working away on wetland topics, and maybe also topics that relate to some of the exotic plants that we have on the property, these invasive species that are a nuisance. The area that we're looking at right now was once the retention area for the water that the city used as a drinking supply. We're in the process of renovating this area and recreating wetlands, and it's really an interesting area. The water that is in this system starts over in Ravine Gardens, in the seepage areas in the ravines. It flows across the road on the Ravine Gardens where you have the hairpin turn, and then flows onto this property, and then all that water flows east of here toward the St. Johns River, and it flows through a big river swamp on the other side of the railroad tracks. But what you see is the old brick channel which carried the water to what was the control building that pumped the water to the city. This secondary wedge-shaped pool right now is sort of a retention pond, but we have it set up so that our plan anyway is to turn this into a freshwater marsh, and we will replant it with native species. It was just full of invasive exotic species up until Platt Drew and Dick Clark cleaned it all out by hand. It's amazing what they've done. So we plan to put a little check dam up in here, and this weir will control the water that flows through this system so that we can regulate it based on the plants that we've decided to put in here. Getting back to the little student lab that we want to build, we hope to have students working with the plants and the animals in this wetland, and to do scientific research where they are asking questions, developing hypotheses, developing a protocol to collect data, analyzing their results, and forming some conclusions about whatever the questions are that they had to start out with. So this part of the Waterworks property is going to be integral in that whole business of the students and visitors learning about water in this part of Florida.
Here in our Waterworks Community Organic Garden. The garden was dedicated to Jim Townsend last year, and he, along with Dick Franz and myself, were the people who kind of got this garden started. And now we have over 20 gardeners, and it is like today, often a place where you see people, young and old, all different types, ages, professional people as well as retired people like me out here growing really healthy vegetables. It's our spring garden, so some of us, like this one woman over here, she's going to get started today, and even though it's in April, she'll have a great crop. And you can see there are other things already growing. We have some of our kale and collards that we're continuing to harvest, and they were part of the fall garden. Each of the plots is about 12 feet by 32 feet long, and each plot has its own water spigot. Many of the gardeners have timers. Some of them use drip irrigation, which is a good way to water the garden. It's a water conservation method. In addition, this soil is very rich. A few years back, when this garden started, about 2010 is when the idea began to germinate, pardon the pun. And 2011 it really got started. But prior to that, it was large piles, huge piles of mulch that local, like Clay Electric, companies that did tree work would dump their mulch here. And what that did was provide a wonderful foundation for our soil. The other day we had an organic farmer come in and give us some tips, so we're always learning, we're always growing, and we don't have any plots available right now, but in the fall we'll be regrouping. Some of our gardeners will decide not to do it again, some move, and we might have a plot or two. So get in touch with us if you want to do some organic gardening. Thank you.